Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I'm Vince Mickens with the Private Air Media Group. This is going to be, I always say this every show, it's going to be a great show and an interesting show, but it is. It's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to talk about something a little different today. We always talk about other aspects of aviation in terms of flying, and we've done stuff about working in the maintenance area or being a professional pilot in the cargo arena and things like that, as well as things related to aerospace and some of the things going on, like the huge excitement right now that the Ingenuity helicopter is going to be flown within the next couple of weeks on Mars, and it'll be the first time we've ever flown any type of an aircraft on another planet. So for us pilots, that's pretty exciting stuff. And for anybody that has experience with helicopter flying, it's even more exciting. So really looking forward to that. But I think it's going to be really great. But we're really looking forward today to talking about the opportunities in airport operations, management, administration, from two very experienced ladies that have worked in the industry. And of course, we're kind of starting to wrap up Women's History Month and want to showcase or highlight things that women are doing in every aspect of aviation. And airport management is not one that you hear every day that women are running airports, but they are all over the country, actually. And so it's really cool to have both, and both come from similar and not similar backgrounds. So it'll be interesting to hear their paths and what they've been doing and that type of thing. I have to digress for just a second, and well, I have to put it this way. So I actually have never met either woman before today on the show, but they both are in cities, or come from cities, I should say, that I worked in and flew in, San Diego and Atlanta. So I know their airspace very well, and am very familiar with a lot of things related to both of their cities and that type of thing. So it's going to be a little extra fun to have that commonality, if you will. One of the things that as I continue my digressing, I have to tell one little quick story about San Diego. So about 20 years or so ago, as a journalist at the time, I was covering an air show at what then was called Miramar Naval Air Station. And I decided, since I was a pilot and had a plane, I was going to get permission to fly in. Well, I went through a few hoops to do that. I have to admit, 20 years ago, it wasn't quite as difficult to do then as it would be now. But nevertheless, it was a bit of a challenge to get permission. And the final permission came from the air boss for Miramar. But I did get the permission. So I flew down on the morning of the show early. I mean, like really early. Sorry about that. Flew down really early, and was actually asked to circle over French Valley Airport, a little bit north of Miramar. And they were actually doing flight training exercises, even though there was an air show that day. Doesn't stop the military. They keep right on trucking. So they were doing military exercises anyhow. To make a long story short, they had me on hold, and the air boss at the last minute said, "You know what? You're not going to be able to land here." And I was like, "Oh man." And then one of the pilots in an A6, he said, "Oh, come on, boss. We'll make room for him. Let him come on in." And so they did that. They made room for me to get into the pattern and land. Of course, Miramar has a very wide and a very big runway. I did nail the landing, but I got to admit, my little Piper Aero 200 on that big airfield was I was like, wow, this place is huge. It was the largest airport I'd ever landed at. And so went on, had a great air show and everything. And then the other side of the story is that when it was time for me to depart, I requested and went through the procedures and everything. And they said, taxi down to, and I forget what intersection it was, but it was the last intersection of this very long runway. So needless to say, I was taxiing for probably 15 minutes. I don't remember, but it was a long, long taxi. And even with that, from the last intersection of the runway, I still had about 2,000 or 3,000 feet of runway ahead of me to take off from. And they confirmed that I was comfortable with that. And I said, yes. And they said, okay, you know, you can take off from the last intersection. So that was my experience with that there in San Diego, but it was pretty cool. And it was really neat to be able to do that. So I know, talking like an aviation geek, what can I say? Anyhow, let me move on and introduce our guest so we can talk about airport management and administration. I'll first start with Nyota Baker. Nyota began her career in the United States Air Force as an airfield manager, and that included airfields in the Middle East, as well as what is now known as Dobbins Air Reserve Base there in Atlanta. Nyota is currently an air planner for Joint Staff Forces here in, actually, I wanted to say in the DC area, but it's actually over in Newport News, Virginia. Nyota has 2 degrees from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. That includes a bachelor's degree in professional aeronautics with a minor in aviation safety and a master's in aeronautical science and aerospace safety. Want to hear a little bit more about that because that sounds like some interesting studying you had to do. So welcome to the show, Nyota. Are you able to hear me okay, Nyota?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Welcome to the show.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. But welcome to the show and glad to have you. I understand if you're having a little bit of connection problem. My other guest is Danette Bewley, who is currently the president and CEO of Tucson Airport Authority out there in sunny and warm Arizona. Speaking of which, Danette is actually riding shotgun with a couple of her colleagues with a colleague and Pops, her dad, on the way down to an aviation event. Actually sounds like that's going to be fun watching some F-16 action. Wish I were with you guys. Danette has a bachelor's in business administration with an emphasis in aviation management. She has a master of arts in management, and she has a master of public administration. Danette is an A.A.E, accredited airport executive, a C.A.E, certified airport executive, and then she tops that all off with a private pilot's license, which she had no choice because dad was a naval aviator. So I'm sure he was like, you got to at least get your private. Danette, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have both of you guys on the show, and I'm looking forward to this conversation to try to enlighten our viewers about opportunities in something that a lot of us take for granted, and that's the airports that we fly in and out of, either as a passenger or pilot, that somebody has to be in charge of in terms of operations and safety and all of the above. So, but one of the things that our viewers like to hear more than anything is, how did you get into it? How did you start? So I'm going to kick it off with you, Nyota. If you could tell us a little bit about, you're originally from Atlanta, and you actually have a pretty cool story that we talked about in pre-show about how all this came about and you ended up in airfield management and that type of thing with the Air Force and then as a civilian and all the other things. So tell us a little bit about your background. Are you still having audio issues? Yeah, she is. Let me switch to Danette. Danette, if you could tell us a little bit about your background, which is also great from a San Diego perspective.
Sure, thank you again. I am born and raised in San Diego, California, and born into what I consider an aviation family. My father was a naval aviator, flying at Miramar, NAS Miramar at the time. Now it's turned into a Marine Corps station, but at that time it was Fightertown, USA. For those of you that are watching that are really young, far younger than me, you may remember a very famous squadron called Top Gun. That was at Miramar. And actually Top Gun was started by my Navy uncle, Dan Patterson. And so I grew up in an environment where And I didn't know. I really had no clue. Top Gun was cool before Top Gun was cool. But anyway, I grew up in an aviation town, and I really didn't know anything more than aviation. While my dad was a Navy pilot, he was also flying for the airline. So he was doing some reserves and flying for an airline called Pacific Southwest Airlines, PSA. For those of you that may remember it, they were the airline that had a big smile on its under its fuselage, the nose. Very fun airline out of San Diego. So really had an opportunity to be around the airports, both Miramar and San Diego International Airport, Lindbergh Field, for the early part of my life. And I wanted to be a pilot. So I do what everybody does. I joined the Boy Scouts, and they had an Explorer Post program, and it was sponsored by my dad's airline, PSA. So I went into that. That was fun because a girl in the Boy Scouts, you can imagine, this is 1978, 79, not a super popular thing, but I did it. And so I started flying when I was about 16 and didn't get too far until I really got into college and went into National University there in San Diego into their aerospace program and finished my flight training there and earned my pilot's license and entered into the aviation management curriculum. Really my goal was to become a naval aviator as well. And that didn't pan out very well because there's very limited slots for women at that time when it came to going to aviation officer candidate school in Pensacola. So I had a little pivot and I kept going to school and finished up on management and wound up getting into the air traffic control program with the FAA. Controller. And I did that for a short amount of time for the first phase, and I realized that air traffic control wasn't really my passion. So I decided to exit that program.
Looks like we're having. Oh, there you go.
And I went to.
You're fine. Go ahead.
So
You were coming in and out a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. So I went down to the airport and applied for a job, and I wound up getting a job as the airport noise information specialist, and which is really what you do when you're listening to people who have aircraft noise concerns. They file a complaint and we investigate it. So that was my first job at San Diego International Airport. And then I moved up and around in the airport system there for about 14 years. And my advice to anybody who's trying to get a job is take whatever job they offer you. It doesn't matter what it is, just get your foot in the door, because once you're in, then you can prove what you're capable of and you can move around within your airport system. There's so many jobs, and that's what I wound up doing until I left San Diego. My last job there was the manager of terminal operations, and that's when I got asked to go run Jacksonville International Airport in Florida. Did that for a few years, and then got asked to go run a capital development program at Reno Tahoe Airport. A great lady was the CEO, and she was a real mentor to me in the industry, and I really took the opportunity to go work for her and do something I hadn't done before. And so I did that. And then after about 5.5 years at Reno, I applied for a position at Tucson International Airport. I really like being on the West Coast. I like being, in more arid climates, and it was a little closer to my hometown of San Diego.
So as go ahead.
I've been in Tucson now almost 9 years, and it's been a wonderful experience. And almost 2 years ago, was asked to serve as the president and CEO of the Tucson Airport Authority.
That's wonderful. You've had a great career path. One of the things that we, try to do, as I mentioned earlier, is suggest to the aspiring young aviation professionals about opportunities in airport operations, administration, management, and that type of thing. And what I talked about earlier is that in a lot of your schools where kids are studying aviation and different aspects of it, airport management or airport operations may be part of the curriculum. It may not, but it's not really emphasized that much. And so a lot of them don't realize that there are great opportunities with what you do and what you've done over the years, and what you and Nyota have done and been drawn to. So can you tell us a little bit more about what some of the specific areas are that are very important that you deal with, and that these aspiring young aviation professionals should take in consideration?
Absolutely. First, I think it's important to recognize that airports are like little cities. You know, we have infrastructure, we have police, we have fire departments, we have administration, we have subject matter experts in engineering, environmental services, airside operations, you know, a lot of specialty IT. Oh my gosh, IT is a really important aspect of it. Finance, human resources. I mean, you name it, just about any type of a job that's in any business will be at an airport. And I have a guy who's a finance person who told me that his biggest regret was that he didn't find an airport sooner in his career.
Wow.
And that's how much fun he has and loving what he does. I think for those that are already bitten by the aviation bug, you already know what you want to do, where you want to be. You've already got the passion, which is wonderful, because so many people don't have that direction. They don't know what they want to do, or they don't know the direction to go. My advice is, don't worry about the specific direction. If you already know you want aviation, just go for anything aviation and get your foot in the door.
Yeah. So I was going to say, when you have people that are applying for different positions, if somebody so let's use a specific example. Somebody's at Embry-Riddle and they are finishing up a degree in aeronautical science. Maybe they were even in a professional flight training program to become a professional pilot, and they're kind of on hold because of COVID. So they want to stay in the aviation environment. If that person came to you and said, you know, what can I do right now in airport operations, what would you recommend?
I'm sorry, I get a little distracted because of our driving. The signal was coming in and out. So you were talking about the people that are in an education program who got a little stymied by the COVID situation.
Right, and they're wanting to stay in aviation while they may still become a professional pilot down the road, but they just want to stay in the industry. And so working in an airport operation situation, what would you advise to them?
Well, I think anytime you can get an opportunity to be around an airport and improve your understanding of an operation adds value. You know, even though I didn't really enjoy going into the air traffic control section of aviation, I'm glad I did it. It gave me perspective in an area that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I have perspective from being an pilot, but not from learning what an air traffic controller does, even in the very early stages. So having that perspective is really important. I think if you spend time, you can look at internships, even entry-level positions at airports. I think all of that adds value and perspective that you can't gain otherwise.
Got you. Yeah. I'm hoping that Nyota can rejoin us. She had some technical issues and she actually had dropped off. So we'll see if she's able to chime back in. When you decided to get let me rephrase that. When did you decide to get your private pilot's license? And was that just something you did as a personal thing, or was that part of your whole involvement in aviation and wanting to add that in there?
Oh, it was really from the very beginning. Again, I just knew that's what I wanted to do from from the very start. And it was just a process of moving in that direction. And so that was just my personal goal. And it was also a career goal. And, you know, it was interesting then that my career changed when I was not able to get into the Navy. Now I could get into the Navy. Let me back up. I wanted to be a pilot. I wasn't going to join the Navy and not be a pilot.
Right. You did mention that was a goal of yours initially.
Yeah. So when I went to the airport side, it was really a pivot. And I do believe that some things happen for a reason, and you just have to say that sometimes a door will close, but a window will open. You got to be comfortable, you know, making a shift in directions. I mean, it's like if you're flying, you get a wind, you know, the wind shifts and you have to adjust. Not everything is going to line up the way you had hoped, but you know what? Sometimes it's better for you, because I didn't know that the career of airport management would be so amazing and so fulfilling, and really I think it's probably the better fit for me. So it turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm this is a new one for, there she goes. Okay. We're trying to get Nyota back on. Nyota, you can hear us. Can you see us and everything now?
Yes, I can see you guys. Can you see me?
Yes, we can. We
Okay.
can see and hear you. Welcome back.
I'm so sorry about that.
Oh, don't worry about it. I've had some challenging times, sometime with Zoom, et cetera, and so forth. And you can either, you know, be embarrassed about it. You can say, hey, it's Zoom. So what can we do? So you guys just want to test my skills. You know, you got Danette on the road, zooming down the highway. Thank God she's in the passenger seat. And then you've got you. And you guys are aviators, you know? No. So Nyota, we've been talking about career paths and you know, the opportunities that are available and things like that. Let's start out. Let's have a little fun. I told you I was going to get you on this one. We're going to talk about you when we first started. So you grew up in Atlanta, and you have an interesting reason that you even got interested in airports. I think you grew up, you said you lived near an airport, near an airport, near Hartsfield.
Yeah.
One of the within kind of the not within, but near the airport traffic pattern.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So growing up in College Park, Georgia, where Delta was very, very busy, especially back in the 90s. We lived like right on the approach end of I can't remember which runway it was. I think we only had 2 runways back then. But anyway, we had a lot of airport noise. All I heard was aircraft taking off all day long, landing and taking off, and I just loved it. So I always had a fascination with the airport. I love being in the environment. I used to go and hang out at the airport. I had a job, my first job as a teenager when I was 16, working at Subway. And I worked on the international concourse, and I loved it. I worked at 5 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays and Sundays. And then I decided, let's try a different restaurant on another concourse. And then I started working at Ben & Jerry's at the same airport. And I just loved it. And so sometimes when I would go out with my friends, with my girlfriends, I say, well, let's go out to eat and let's go to a restaurant at the airport. And they say, why do you always want to be at the airport? Or if I had a date, we'd go to a restaurant, TGI Fridays at the airport. It's just convenient. I just like being there.
What is it that you like so much about the airport? What drew you to it? And when did you figure out that you were interested in actually doing something specific to working at an airport and that type of thing?
Well, it was always my go-to. Whenever I thought about a job, I would think, well, I could go up to the airport and try to do whatever at the airport. It was just anything. I just wanted to do it at the airport. So when I signed up for the Air Force Reserves, I still I wasn't really thinking about the airport, but when they gave me my job options, it was airfield management, a dental hygienist, or a chaplain. And so I said, oh, what's this airfield management job? And the recruiter said, I don't know, something at the airport. And I said, I'll take it if it's at the airport. That's what I'm going to do. And the rest is history. I wanted any and everything to do with the airport.
Sure. Once you discovered, or once you got that opportunity in terms of airfield management with the Air Force Reserve, and moving forward with that, tell us about, as you learned more about airport operations, administration, safety, and things like that, how that evolved.
Ooh, that's a lot. Well, when I first got into
we have 35 more minutes. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So when I first got into when I got out of basic training and I got into tech school and I started learning how to do the flight planning, I learned about the runways and the airfield lighting and all that stuff. I really realized how in depth it is, especially with flight planning and learning how to do NOTAMs and how to actually put the NOTAMs in the system, cancel the NOTAMs. And I realized the weather briefings, I realized how thorough you have to be even to prepare for a flight, to prepare a runway for a flight, and then you're talking about the clear zones, and you're talking about the entire airfield and the entire operation of it. It just intrigued me. And it's just something that I always wanted to be a part of. And I realized that working at an airport, it's like a little world, but you're in charge of the airplanes, you're in charge of the passengers, the security, the fire department. You're just in a whole little community, and you get to see people travel and go to places they love to go, or you get to see people get in aircraft to go train, to learn how to fly. It's just everybody's got their own thing they're doing, and I just love it. I just love the little airport world.
Yeah, and I think what makes it interesting in having both of you guys on the show. So Danette, she grew up in an aviation environment with her dad being a naval aviator, her desire to be one, and for various reasons it didn't happen, but she still stayed in aviation, got her private pilot's license, et cetera, and then got into the whole thing, which we've talked about in terms of her experience with airport management, administration, et cetera. You don't come from an aviation background. You're not a pilot, but
Nope.
You love anything that has to do with it. So it's interesting that you learned all these things about flight planning and about operations and that type of thing, and kind of jumped in feet first at Dobbins, if I remember correctly, right? At Dobbins Air Force Reserve, or Air Reserve, and that type of thing. And so you also, there was something else you did experience-wise. Well, it'll come back to me, but I think, no, I know exactly what I was going to ask you. I'm kind of curious about what made you say, I'm going to, because most people that go to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, they're usually on a track to be a pilot in many cases and things like that, or other aspects of the industry. So with your experience of being an airfield manager, what made you say, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to major in aeronautical and I think aerospace safety, et cetera, and so forth? What brought that about?
Well, working at Dobbins and actually responding to airfield emergencies, like in-flight emergencies and ground emergencies, that's what made me want to get more into safety, because I wanted to always make the airfield a safer environment for pilots to fly in. And so once I got more into safety and risk management and safety management systems and human factors, it was a lot of different avenues that I wanted to take, and specifically human factors. I really wanted to get into human factors and aeronautical decision making, more into the psychology of it. But then I realized I might be running out of time, so maybe I would do manufacturing. And so that's how I ended up at Lockheed. But then once I got to Lockheed and I got more into manufacturing and production, I said, well, maybe I can pursue the human factors aspect of it. And to be honest with you, I changed my mind again, and that's when I got into this. I did aeronautical science, and then I did aerospace safety as my minor. But I'm also considering going back to do human factors, because that's still on my radar. Just because I want to still study human interaction with machines, and just how we interact with anything, hardware, liveware, anything, and make it better and make it safer, especially with the advancements of technology. So that's always going to be on my radar as well. Safety is always going to be a priority for me, especially in the aviation environment. So
yeah, I totally get that about the safety factor because when I was with AOPA, I was with the AOPA Air Safety Foundation, and we dealt with human factors and all the other aspects of safety and that type of thing. And obviously, it's a key component to all things aviation and aerospace, but it's a key component that you do things in a safe way, and when things don't happen or happen negatively, then you want to find out why to keep it from happening again and things like that. So and the human factor we talked about all the time, was always the kind of the 90-10 thing, like 90% of accidents or a little bit more than that were human error or pilot error and that type of thing. So that's why the human factor plays in very much so, and becomes even more important on the aerospace end, because when you're going out there, you got less opportunities to correct something, that type of thing. Speaking of Embry-Riddle and sure, go ahead, Danette.
You switch topics. I'd love to chime in because I find what you're talking about to be so fascinating and interesting. And it is another aspect of aviation or airport management that people may not know. And as I was saying, operating an airport is like a mini city with construction. One of the largest projects that our airport has ever undertaken is an airfield safety enhancement project. And it really primarily comes out of the fact that we have a lot of runway incursions. We have issues with hotspots. We have pilots with expectation bias that it can really become a problem. One of the interesting elements of Tucson International Airport is that we have a through-the-fence operation with the Air National Guard. They're the 162nd wing of the Arizona Air National Guard. And what's fascinating about the Guard is that they are the international training base for the F-16. So when an allied nation buys an F-16, they are trained to fly that aircraft at Tucson International with the expert pilots at the A&G. In fact, as we were mentioning, Bruce and my dad and I are on our way out to the very Goldwater Range to watch the F-16s blow up stuff. And it's really exciting. Part of that partnership, they're going to strafe and they're going to hit targets, and we get to go out and watch. So that, when do you ever get to do something like this? Last year I went up in a 135 and got to watch a fueling operation out over in New Mexico. That was beautiful because I got to lay in that spot where they bring in the fuel boom and watch an F-16 come up underneath. So great partnership with the 162nd. But going back to human factors, aviation is about the safety and human factors. And this is where you can tie in airport management, air traffic control, safety, human factors, and trying to make a safe environment for everyone to operate.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned those things, because that's really an important aspect. What I was going to ask you about too, Danette, was you were telling a little story before we went live about an experience you had with Embry-Riddle Prescott. Can you share that again? Because I thought it was really neat what you guys did.
Well, Embry-Riddle is not my alma mater. As I mentioned, I went to National University, but Embry-Riddle is located here in Arizona. They're headquartered, or their main campus is in Prescott, Arizona. And I have a strong belief that if you're in aviation, it doesn't matter what school you go to. We want to support students. We want to support people that are career-minded and help with hands out to teach and train.
We lost her for a second. I was afraid that was going to happen. There she goes.
Am I back?
You're back. Yes. Go ahead.
stop then. We'll pull over so I don't lose my full signal. But the instructor reached out to me and said he was struggling with being able to execute the class because of COVID constraints and needed some help, and shared his curriculum with me and asked just for a little bit of help. And we decided not a little bit of help, a lot of help. We took his entire curriculum and we assigned each discipline to someone in our staff. So when he would talk about airfield maintenance, our airfield maintenance guy was on that Zoom call with them, and he was giving them soup to nuts, everything they do. We had engineers, police, fire, security, airside operations, airport communications, finance, administration. Every topic that he had.
Oh, we lost you again. There you go.
We were part of, and so the whole semester was every Friday for a semester. Really great for us to do that. We were really happy to please on the list. I gotta
get to the top of it.
Yeah, you guys can keep moving because where you are now, your signal is really weak. So I know you're on the road, not on the International Space Station, but anyhow, she'll be back with us in a sec. Nyota, one of the things I was going to shift a little bit. I see you're back, Danette, but I'm going to come back to you in a sec. I'm going to shift a little bit to Nyota because Nyota, all this airfield management experience that you've had, but right now you're doing something a little different, which goes with the factor that you never know where your career is going to take you. Now, I know currently you're not doing airfield management, but you'd like to get back into that. Tell us about what you're doing now as an air planner for Joint Forces staff.
So right now I'm a planner, an air planner for models and simulations for joint staff, which means I work with the Navy, the Army, the Marines, and the Air Force on different simulations, wartime simulations. So the simulations that I work on, I mostly fly different types of aircraft depending on which country we're warfighting with. Can't go into too many details about it, but it's
Oh, you'd have to shoot me.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a departure from what you've been doing for so many years. But has it been a great experience for you?
Yeah, it's been a pretty good experience. Anything that I can gain, any kind of knowledge that I can gain, it doesn't hurt anything. You know, I'm still air planning. I'm still doing research on different aircraft. I'm still learning about different aircraft, and I can still take those skills and go back to management, aviation, airfield management. I can go back to flight operations. You know, the doors are still open for me.
Yeah, wide open. As a matter of fact, in this industry, the doors are wide open for everything right now for aviation and aerospace. There's just so much going on both sides. And that's, you know, again, one of the goals of all things aviation and aerospace is to let the younger generation know that if you have something that you're even remotely interested in our industry, go for it. Because by the time you finish your education and start figuring things out, the opportunity is there. One of the things that you and I talked about a little bit in pre-show, and I'd like to bring up again, and I bring up on every show, is the importance of networking and in the sense of getting to making contact with people in the industry specific to the area that you're interested in. So we're talking about airport management, airfield management, and from your perspective, from your military background, et cetera, and the fact that you also are still teaching as an assistant professor, aviation, what do you recommend to the young people out here that are watching? What do you recommend their next step be in terms of getting involved in things like what you do and what you've experienced? Hello.
Well, I think that the first thing that they should do is narrow down what they really want to do, what they think they really want to do.
Sure.
I had this issue with my students. I had a lot of students that for instance, said, I want to be an air traffic controller. And I'm going to use one student as an example. And I watched her closely and I said, no, you don't. You don't want to be an air traffic controller. And she said, Miss Baker, how do you know? And I said, what do you really like? What's your passion? What do you want to do? And she says, I really want to do safety. And I said, and what else? And she said, I like law. And I said, well, why don't you do aviation law?
There you go.
And she said, I never knew that existed. And
Exactly.
I said, well, let's do some research and let's figure out how you can get on a path on a career with aviation law. So it's things like that you have to. I want students to talk more. Go to your advisor, find a mentor, somebody that you can be honest with and say, I don't really know what I want to do. I know I love aviation, but I just really don't know which direction I want to go in. Heck, you can call me. I'd love to be a consultant. I helped a lot of students get on a different path. It's okay to get your degree in one thing and then go to a totally different path in aviation. You can get a degree in air traffic control and then do safety. All of that ties in together. You can be a flight student and then go to do aviation safety.
Yes, and you bring up such a valid point, and it's one of the ones that I emphasize the most is reach out and connect with somebody, and as you figure out what you're doing, we all know you're a little older, I'm a lot older, and we all know that when you're in college or even in high school, you're not really sure. You may have, like you did, where you knew you loved anything that had to do with airports, but you really didn't know what that meant until later. And so the thing that I think is important for young people to do is to, if you think you have an interest in something aviation or aerospace related, start figuring out how to make contacts, whether it's going to an aviation event or things like that. Even going to air shows and things like that can connect you with people. And then if you stay in touch with them, if you follow up, you might be pleasantly surprised at what they may suggest you for or recommend you, or who they may recommend you to, that will further your interest and your possibilities in the industry. So I think that's a really valid point, and I'm really glad that you emphasize that.
Another thing I want to add.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go
Another
ahead.
thing I want to add is internships and co-ops.
Yes.
Even if you just go to the airport and do like me and work at Ben and Jerry's, that you're still there. You're still at the airport. You can still learn something.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit. While I'm waiting for your signal to come back in, you just brought up a really interesting point, because I did a show about airport operations and management several months ago, and the manager of Van Nuys Airport, she actually was talking about how she worked in a gift shop at an airport just to get a feel for what that aspect of things were like. And now she's been, and that was years ago, and then she's been managing Van Nuys for a number of years, and I forget where she was before that, but she worked at and I remember stopping down in the show and going, you worked at a gift shop and you're running one of the busiest airports now in the country? And she said, yeah, I just wanted to get a feel for that aspect of things, so I'd have a better understanding of that type of thing. Danette, welcome back. We are I'm sorry, Nyota, did you finish? Because you cut out for a minute and I just kind of took over.
I didn't know if you heard me say about taking advantage of internships and co-ops.
I did hear you say that, but you were saying something after it that we didn't hear.
I think I was saying to even if you don't get a, I don't know. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, well, we can hear you now.
Okay, so even if you don't get an internship or a co-op, you can do volunteer work, like you said, with the air shows. I'm working with women in aviation, and a lot of times I need help with my volunteer work with them, and I bring along students with me or young adults that are into aviation. I bring them to do events with me. So doing little things like that really helps as well.
Yeah, and that's really good that you brought up women in aviation. In fact, we call them the alphabets: Women in Aviation, AOPA, Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association, EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, MBAA, National Business Aviation Association, AAA, Airport, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm just kidding. I can never remember the entire name for that, but the Association for Airport Executives, et cetera. And on that, Danette, we were talking while you were regrouping, we were talking about internships, co-ops, and different ways to get involved in the industry in the early stages when young people are trying to figure out what they want to do in aviation. You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, a lot of airports have internship programs, and I always think it's a wonderful opportunity if it works out with where you live in the country or your educational program. But I like the idea too that if you get a job at the airport, even if it's in one of the concessionaires, you're still getting some experience. You're still getting a feel for the airport, and you still get an opportunity to meet people that are working for the airport itself. We've hired people who have worked in concessions and brought them into our team. You can be a fueler and then turn out crossing over to be in our maintenance department or a fleet mechanic. I mean, there's so many different opportunities. So, the airport just has so much going on. So again, take advantage of those opportunities where they are, because you never know when the next opportunity may come your way.
Sure, and having expertise in those different areas doesn't mean that you have to necessarily get a bachelor's degree or something like that. If you go to a trade school and you have a couple of years of training in maintenance or firefighting or any of those things, all of those, a lot of people have to try to remember, and I think that's what you both have been trying to emphasize, an airport is a small city. So it has all of the facility needs, infrastructure needs that are required for any type of a small community. And some airport communities are bigger than others, but they all are communities that have all of those elements. So I think that's great that you brought that up. Nyota, were you getting ready to chime in with something?
I just wanted to also say that they got to look at the things that's up and coming as well, like the drones. Drones are a big thing now. A lot of these younger kids that like to play remote control, aircraft or cars. That's perfect. Get into drones. Get into the models and simulations. If you like video games, that's a good career path. I just feel like if you want to do aviation, if your heart is in it, you can find something to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you just have to know what it is.
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that it just helps to know all of the avenues and what it is, that you can do. But I love to help people figure that out.
Yeah, and I apologize to both of you because we have delays and everything, and you guys have had technical things. So if I cut you off, it's not intentional. I'm thinking there's a break, and it's not. It actually, the audio cut and that type of thing. Speaking of drones and the like, in the Tucson area, is that something that you guys deal with, Danette, in terms of a new aspect of aviation operations?
We do. Fortunately, we don't have as many drone incidents as I've seen pop up at other airports and in other airspace. We do what we can to educate the public about responsible flying of a drone and how to register their drone, to be used in and around the area. Certainly notifying the FAA if you're in certain segments of the airspace. but it hasn't become a problem for us yet, and hopefully it won't.
Sure. And in terms of your experience with the military side of things, Nyota, do you know if that's becoming more of a factor with, you know, military airfields and things like that? Is that something on their radar right now?
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. I
You
missed.
didn't hear me? Can you hear me now?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can now.
Okay, because I was going to do a commercial for AT&T. I mean, you know, can you hear me now? Um, I was saying, is that a factor also that you know of in terms of drones and that type of thing with military airfields and airfield management from your experiences? Was that on the radar with them or is on the radar with them? You lost me again? Okay.
I can chime in. I can
Go ahead.
actually, I can probably say, yeah, it really is. You know, working with the 162nd Air Wing and then Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is the home of the A-10s, which is about 4 miles away from Tucson International Airport. It's a big problem, a big concern. And again, we haven't had as much interference with drones that I've heard about. Actually, what I see is more of a problem lately is lasers. People think
Heard a lot about that.
Yeah, it's so unsafe. It can blind a pilot. It could, you know, it's just a very dangerous. I don't know if it's a hobby or if it's something that people do.
It makes absolutely no sense that anybody would ever want to do that.
Exactly, and that to me is just as dangerous as some of the drone activity. And actually, it's almost malicious.
It is.
So, you know, and obviously that can wind up in a federal offense. Somebody gets caught doing that, especially if there's an incident or an accident. I mean, it could ruin your life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very those kind of you know, instigated type of things. Just I don't get it. But that's a great point you bring up, because I just read something recently, and there have been thousands of laser, you know, I won't call them a strike, but you know, for lack of a better term, that have they've been dealing with all over the country. And again, you know, that comes back to safety and how that all how comes into play. So we're about to wrap up here. One of the things I wanted to do was, and you touched on a little bit, Nyota, but wanted to see what your perspectives are on the future of our industry as we come out of this kind of COVID shutdown and things start picking up in terms of air traffic, et cetera, and so forth. What's you guys' perspective on things going forward? Either one of you.
I can take a shot from the airport management side. You know, I just saw a financial outlook from Moody's that said that we've, as an airport industry, we've been upgraded from not so good to a stable position. So that's positive. I was meeting with airlines the other day, and they're optimistic that they'll be returning some of the lost air service, restoring flights, you know, over the next 2 years. But I think it's going to be about 2 years for us to get back to what we would consider normal. And I don't know if we'll ever reach the same normal flight levels, the same normal passenger levels. I mean, it's certainly what I would hope. But it makes it very difficult for us to plan our operating and maintenance needs, our capital needs, our personnel needs. You know, everything is based on revenue and expenses. So it's hard to know how much we have to spend on supporting our aviation system when we don't know what our revenue stream looks like. So it's going to be a little bit iffy over the next 2 years, but you know, we're going to have to be very careful with what we do and how we do it.
Sure. At the same time, I've heard, at least on the pilot and maintenance, et cetera, side, that these opportunities, so pilot shortage is something that's in the conversation now, that's going to continue the pilot shortage was a thing before COVID. And once things ramped back up what happened during COVID, as you guys know, is that a lot of pilots took early retirement. They just called it quits and said they're done. Not a furlough, but actually being done and that type of thing. So private activity picked up quite a bit in terms of charters and business aviation, even during COVID, because I think a lot of people were using that as an offset from flying on the airlines. But after COVID is over, there is going to be a surge again in the need for pilots, mechanics, because mechanics did the same thing. A lot of them were nearing retirement and went ahead and took early retirement, that type of thing. Danette, have you seen that aspect of things where you can see where that may trend forward in a positive way in terms of opportunities for the next generation?
Absolutely. I think as long as people want to fly and travel, there's always going to be a need for pilots. And it's not just commercial aviation. You mentioned your affiliation with the cargo carriers. Cargo is on a major uptick right now.
Absolutely.
Our cargo is off the charts at Tucson International Airport. And, in fact, we're a port of entry, so we get a lot of traffic across the border from Mexico. And our Customs and Border Protection personnel are telling us that they've been doing almost 6 times the normal yearly operation that they did prior to COVID. There's a lot of e-commerce going on, and I doubt people want to go back to shopping more traditional by going to a mall and hunting and pecking when you can do the hunting and pecking online. So there's going to be a need to transport those goods, and they're going to be on cargo carriers. So pilots, I think, are always going to be in demand. If I were a younger woman, I think I might try to go back and become a pilot.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, if I were a younger man, I might go ahead and get my commercial. No, it is a huge opportunity. And I thank you for bringing that up. We actually had cargo on a few shows back, and they talked about it being wide open especially for those that are just getting into the industry. In fact, I had a young man on, and he's wanting to be a professional pilot in business aviation, fly corporate jets and that type of thing. But right now he's flying cargo on a Lear 35 and a Beech King Air. But he's building time and he's getting paid for it, and he's doing it in a way that, is I think quicker and more effective than if you're just doing like flight training. Not to knock it, but I think it's not to knock those who are building time through being a CFI or double I, but still certified flight instructors, for those who wonder what I'm talking about.
And I think corporate aviation is taking a gigantic leap and spike as well, because those business travelers aren't wanting to fly commercial because of COVID or other reasons. NetJets is a real popular option for people, or yes. if you're in a big company that has its own fleet of aircraft, there's that. So I don't think aviation is going anywhere. So I think a pilot, professional pilot track is still a very viable track to follow. It's a very good career.
Absolutely. Listen, we have run out of time, so I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to give a little outgoing advice, if you will, to our young viewers. I'll start with you, Nyota. Sorry about that. If you could tell us what your final thoughts are in terms of advice for the young.
I just want you to do your research, ask questions, don't be afraid to connect, bug your advisors. If your advisors won't help, find somebody to help you, to answer your questions and help you to figure out a path. But research. Do your own advocate as well. Don't depend on anybody else, but depend on someone else at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Danette?
My advice is follow your heart, follow your dreams, don't give up. If one door closes, another door will open. You will find your way. Just don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Keep on trying, and eventually you can get your foot in the door, and then really the sky is the limit after you get your foot in the door.
Can't put it any better than that. Listen, you both have been real troopers with all the technical issues that you've had. One of you on the move, The other one had with what was going on. But I appreciate both of you and everything that you've shared and talked about and enlightened our viewers about. So thank you to you both. And thank you everyone for watching All Things Aviation and Aerospace. My name is Vince Mickens with the Private Air Media Group, and we will continue this next week with another show. You guys take care, stay safe, have fun watching those F-16s.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
You too.